Eclipse season gets spicier as Mercury grounds to a halt and begins its retrograde motion on Monday, April 1st, bringing major delays, communication issues, and forgotten old fights. You will have 24 days to retrace your steps, rethink your approach, and get to the bottom of things. I am here to tell you more and to break it down for all 12 signs. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive astrology. If you enjoy my content, if you like my work, please take a second to support me by leaving a like or a comment, subscribing, and pressing the notification bell. It helps YouTube algorithm push my content in front of a larger audience, helps me grow. You also have the option of saying thank you by buying me a coffee. I really appreciate that as well. And before we dive in, we are in the middle of the eclipse season. Things may feel emotional and heightened. If you have any questions, you want to know what's ahead for you, you want to understand your natal chart better, you can always book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. On my website, you can also find various planetary magic items like candles and oils that I create. They're all handcrafted, they are created at selected times, and all carry within unique properties aligned with the nature of the planet that I highlight. No transit is ever the same, so no candle I create is ever the same. They all involve a ritual element, they have an invocation element, sort of, connection with the planet. They are created at the hour of the planet. I'm very meticulous with the way I create them. And since we are talking about Mercury retrograde, I'd like to highlight my Mercury in Virgo candle and Mercury in Gemini candle. So both of these are really good for Mercury retrograde. Mercury in Virgo was created with Mercury in Virgo, as the name of the candle says. Mercury in Virgo is very precise, very meticulous, very analytical and detail-oriented. So this is the perfect candle for anyone struggling with focus, struggling to narrow things down and express themselves in a concise way. Mercury in Gemini is all about exploring multiple possibilities, being curious, being excited, but also communicating in a fluid, adaptable, and sparkly, charming way. Both of these are really good for Mercury retrograde collectively for all of us, and especially good for anyone born with their Mercury in detriment and fall, Mercury in Pisces and Sagittarius. If your natal Mercury is placed in the dark house, 6th, 8th, or 12th, if it's conjunct, opposite, or square Saturn or Neptune, because Neptune can be very imaginative, creative, but it can also sometimes make you forget little things. So definitely check these guys out and get yourself some eclipse season Mercury retrograde support. Moon in Cancer, I have them all right next to me. Moon in Cancer can be a really great tool for the eclipse season to help soothe you, to help relax you and make the eclipse season less intense. So now that we got that out of the way, we can talk about Mercury retrograde. So it begins on April 1st at 6:14 p.m. Eastern, and it lasts until 8:54 a.m. Eastern, April 25th. So it's 3 weeks, 4 days, right? So it's a longer retrograde. Normally it's about 3 weeks. This one just feels longer because it's pretty much the entirety of April. And it's a big one. It coincides with the eclipse season, so it has a very strong impact on the eclipse season. We can look at transits on their own, but you cannot take out of the account the fact that we are in the eclipse season. Mercury will, of course, impact it because the eclipse on April 8th will be conjunct this Mercury retrograde. So Mercury begins the retrograde at 27 degrees 13 minutes Aries and goes all the way back to 15 degrees 58 minute Aries. So it will affect you the most if you have planets or angles like your rising sign, your IC, MC, your descendant, between 15 and 27 degrees cardinal signs, which is Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. You would ideally look at the planet that is aspected, the planet that you have in one of those signs, and ask yourself, what are significations of the planet? If it's Venus, then it's love, connection, relationships, desires, money. If it's Mars, then it's your fighting spirit, your assertive energy, right? And then the question would be, how are those energies needing to be shifted, needing to be observed and explored in order to be expressed better? You will also, the second step would be looking at the houses ruled by those planets and seeing what kind of energies are present in those houses. So let's talk about Mercury retrograding in Aries. In general, Mercury is the planet that is connected to communication. It rules the 3 C's, right? Communication, commerce, and commuting. So it's also the planet of the mind. It's the planet of verbal self-expression. It's the planet of technology. It's the planet of messages, because Mercury classically, as the planet closest to the sun, has been the messenger that delivers. Even, Hermes in Greco-Roman myth is literally the messenger that is able to go up to the skies, but is also able to go down to the underworld. So Mercury is very much quick, analytical, curious, and it represents the mental faculty of our mind. Mercury is in Aries right now since March 9th. Right? Yeah, March 9th. And Mercury in Aries is really fast. It kind of wants to get things done faster. It's very direct. It's very pioneering. So there's a lot of, you may have experienced starting March 9th, your mind speeding up. There may be being new ideas, new pursuits. Maybe you felt more courageous. Maybe you felt ready to get things started, right? Like Mercury entered Aries before Aries season began, but it's already kind of like an introduction of the fresh new energy, fresh insights into like upcoming new year, astrological new year that begins with Aries season. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it's not moving backwards, but it is a perceived motion from Earth. We see Mercury as moving backwards because the difference of speeds. You can think of 2 trains, right? If your train is moving very slowly, if your train is moving really fast and the train next to you is moving slowly, like you're fast, they're slowly, it's going to feel like they're moving backwards because you're moving faster than them. So similarly, Mercury retrograding in the sky feels like it's moving back, but in reality, it's not. However, the effects of the retrograde are usually quite felt because a lot of things slow down, right? The forward momentum slows down. Mercury in Aries is go, go, go. Let's get it done. Let's figure it out. Mercury is retrograding. Communication slows down. Commercial dealings slow down. Negotiations, business dealings, commuting, more delays, more cars breaking down, technical difficulties. There's like a double delay energy that comes also from the fact that the ruler of this Mercury in Aries is Mars. And Mars will be co-present with Saturn, conjoining Saturn on April 10th. So major delays. If you have felt in March that you're getting stuff done, that you're being productive, that you're being accomplished, just be ready that April is going to have a very different flavor. It's going to be a lot slower, a lot more restrained, restricted, and perhaps frustrating. So allow more time for any negotiations, for any contracts. You cannot stop your life. So if there are important documents you need to sign, negotiations you have to make, just allow extra time, be patient, maybe ask somebody else to look over the documents you're signing. Allow extra time for the packages to get delivered, because sometimes there are delays when it comes to postal service, our literal messengers, right? People who bring packages and deliver messages to us. Get ready for issues in communication. Watch out for getting too impatient, right? Mercury in Aries wants to get to the bottom of things really fast. So it is quite likely that your words can be very blunt, direct, and cutting at times, and maybe that causes some issues, tensions in the relationships. There might be higher chances of miscommunications, messages sent to the wrong people. Have you ever had that happen when you send a message about someone to that person? I've had that happen to me once, probably like 10, 12 years ago, a long time ago, but definitely it was awkward. I already didn't have the best relationship with that person, and, quite obviously after sending a message about them to them, our relationship got even worse. So, womp womp. But yeah, be careful, be careful. At the same time, I always say there's no reason to fear the retrograde because it brings up things that are under the surface that need to come out, especially with Aries. Aries will not hesitate to say it, right? And so here, there is a need to say something that's been hiding, something that's been buried under the surface. It may be painful. Chiron is also in Aries. The eclipse will have conjunction to Chiron and Mercury in Aries. So maybe you're saying something that is hurtful to another person, or you're recognizing something that is painful about your past, about your experience, but you're doing so that this could be aired out, this can be addressed, and then you can move forward. So it's not the time to just like hide out and do nothing, but it is a good time to maybe, make edits, look back, talk about the past, heal the past. You may experience old fights coming back. You may have to redo some of your work, right? Like Mercury retrograde always has these like redo, rewrite, re-edit, rethink, reconsider. All of the like redoing energy is quite strong. And a lot of fresh energy that comes with the solar eclipse in Aries will likely have the past lessons or past projects getting revived, revisited, reapproached, right? It's always recommended to try to avoid starting big intellectual projects like starting a website or starting a business, making a business official, because when you do that, you give your business a birth chart, and your business's birth chart will have Mercury retrograde. If your business is dealing with helping people heal the past and you're literally looking at the people's past, maybe it's not the worst idea to start it on the retrograde. But ideally, I would recommend trying to wait as much as you can. If you cannot wait, try your best at preparing yourself mentally, but know that there may be some delays also to things that you start at this time. Like if you're depending on other people for approval, any documentation, any government approval might take longer. But like I said, a good time to make edits, to rewrite something, to revisit an old idea, bring back an old passion, and do research as well. It doesn't mean your life stops, but you can still figure things out while Mercury is retrograding, so that once it's direct on April 25th, you can go full speed ahead. Important dates to note: April 8th, we have the solar eclipse in Aries conjunct Chiron and Mercury retrograde. So this is very much addressing the pain, addressing the past, having conversations, healing, soothing, maybe uncomfortable conversations so that you can process the pain and move forward. Right around this time, Mars conjoins Saturn, the ruler of Mercury retrograde conjoins Saturn. So even more kind of a need for downtime, a need to sit down, rethink, redo something, maybe some kind of frustrating roadblock you're facing that I would encourage you move through with patience and grace and kindness, compassion for yourself and your fellow human beings. And then after April 11th, the energy starts to shift a little bit because Mars and Saturn are separating. Their conjunction will still be in effect for another 5 days at least. But on April 11th, we get Mercury Cazimi. So Mercury conjoins the Sun, always a moment of clarity, insights, deep understanding, good news, and some kind of turning point in the retrograde. And then April 19th, Mercury retrograde conjoins Venus, helping you communicate in a charming, eloquent, compassionate way, in a way that brings you and other people together instead of separating them. So do not fear the retrograde. Let me know what your experience is like with retrogrades normally. If you have any questions, you want me to look at your chart, book a reading on my website, anastasiaastrology.com. And let's take a look at the 12 rising signs to see what kind of things you might be reviewing, rewriting, redoing. I recommend listening for your rising sign because rising sign is like the door into the house that is your natal chart. And it determines where the rest of the transits fall in. But you can listen to your sun or moon horoscopes if you feel like those resonate with you more. If you are an Aries rising, Mercury is retrograding in your first house, and the ruler is Mars in the 12th house. So with Mars in the 12th house and Mars conjoining Saturn in the 12th house, there is a lot of inner work that's going on. Mercury will encourage you to ask outer questions, but a lot of it is inspired by the inner work, right? So like Mars in the 12th house will either encourage you to heal and let go of fears, let go of self-defeating tendencies, let go of bad habits. Perhaps you have some escapist tendencies where you don't sit with your thoughts, or you don't do things that you feel like doing, or you expect other people to maybe approve of you somehow. I know you're an Aries rising and you probably think that you are very independent, and you might be, but your descendant, the sign opposite, is Libra. So you can also be indecisive, especially when it comes to relationships or partnerships, expecting your partner to maybe help you figure some things out. But whatever it might be, so negative tendencies, bad habits, things that are standing in your way, self-defeating talk, or 12th house energies like rest, like having better balance, like allowing yourself to do imaginative healing, spiritual work. All of that can be also sort of craving to be integrated right now. And so the retrograde in the first house encourages you to rethink your career on many levels, right? Like first house is how you answer the question of who am I? So it includes everything else, really. It includes being a parent. It includes being, being an ambitious person. It includes what you look like. So Mercury in the first house could start very much internally in terms of like, what do you want? What do you crave? What needs to be integrated? And then manifest externally, where you are rethinking your look, your style, your name, right? How you present yourself. It might be the time when you feel like changing your hair, your style, your image somehow, because it no longer resonates with who you feel as a person. So very like internal connection to the external, and expressing those two coherently. If you're feeling like a part of you is dying, perhaps it's time to get rid of old clothes or get rid of old things that you feel like used to be important to you. You may be struggling with confidence, struggling with uncertainty at this time, and that is okay. Be kind to yourself. Do things that help you feel at ease, help you feel like yourself. Reflect back on the past, on the things that you have always loved to do, and trust that the answers will come when the time is right. And if you'd like to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Also, I'm curious if this resonates with you. Let me know down below. Next, we have Taurus rising. If you are a Taurus rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 12th house, and the ruler is Mars in the 11th. So Mars in the 11th is asking important questions around belonging, around community, around your hopes and dreams and your place in the collective. And Mercury in the 12th house encourages a sense of healing, a sense of spiritual fulfillment, right? So if we're tying the 11th house and the 12th together, perhaps you are questioning your friendships, you're questioning your connections, you're wondering whether people around you are healing and supportive or maybe not. You may also be wondering whether your life has enough spirituality. Maybe with Mercury retrograde in the 11th house, it's the time to start doing yoga, to consult a therapist, to bring meditation into your life, bring prayer into your life, whatever helps you feel grounded. It will be different for many people. There might also be a need to address your self-defeating tendencies, especially when it comes to friendships or when it comes to relationships with other people. Do you have a tendency to be really nice to everyone, or do you have a tendency to not speak up your mind? So with retrograde in the 12th house, in this very direct sign of Aries, something might be coming from under the surface that you haven't addressed, you haven't expressed, and then really needing to say it. Needing to heal, needing to release something in order to move forward, right? It might be saying goodbye to an old job. It might be saying goodbye to an unhealthy pattern. It might be saying goodbye to a toxic relationship or a toxic friend. in order to get closer to your dreams, I see as a big theme with this retrograde. And if you'd like to know more, do not hesitate to check out my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com, and book a reading. And let me know how this resonates as well in the comment section down below. If you are a Gemini rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 11th house, while the ruler is Mars in your 10th house. So Mars in the 10th house is coming closer and closer to Saturn, conjoining Saturn on the 10th of the month, and you're asking really deep questions professionally. You might also be experiencing a sense of kind of frustration professionally. Mercury is your chart ruler, so it's extra important for you. Mercury rules your 1st house and your 4th house. So questions around your dreams and your community and how those tie with your place of living and how those tie with your self-expression, right, are quite likely. So let's go deeper, right? So on one hand, like Mercury retrograde in the 11th could be very much you wondering about what you want and what you want to be known for and what you want to achieve, right? And maybe things are stuck a little bit and frustrating in terms of career, in terms of demands that are placed on you or your professional struggles. And so Mercury retrograde in the 11th really calls you to get to the bottom of this question of like, what do you want to be known for? What do you want people to remember about you? And start there and try to find some answers there. There might also be a question of like, who do you want to be next to and what kind of colleagues, what kind of environment you want to have, and then maybe solve your professional struggles in that way. Because Mercury rules your 1st and your 4th, you might also be looking at where you want to live and how that affects your dream. So a lot of kind of questions around, like I said, friendships, networks, hopes, and dreams. There might also be a need to help a friend at this time, or ask yourself whether a friendship or a connection is helping you. You know, you might realize that a certain friend is dragging you down. There might be certain conflicts with friends, issues that you haven't discussed. Maybe they're going through a tough time and that is challenging your friendship because they're struggling keeping their life organized and you're sort of trying to step in and help, but it's putting a toll on you. So a lot of important questions around the future, around people that can help you. Even if you are struggling professionally, right? Like with Mars in the 10th, Saturn in the 10th, if you're not quite sure where to go, I would recommend that you look at people that inspire you. You ask a friend for advice. You ask friends if they know somebody who knows somebody. So even though you may be rethinking and releasing some friendships at this time, there can also be new energy coming in, especially we have an eclipse here in a few days, and very much sort of being more proactive, being more direct in terms of following your dreams and taking action and building your community is a good way to start. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Next, we have Cancer risings. If you are a Cancer rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 10th house, and the ruler is Mars in the 9th. So Mercury retrograde in the 10th house is the time of professional upheaval, potentially professional uncertainty. There may be some documents you need to redo, some legal matters you need to address professionally. The ruler is Mars in the 9th, right? Like Mars in the 9th could literally bring, because Mars is about to conjoin Saturn on April 10th, could bring some kind of like delay, like major roadblock that involves education, like you need your diploma and it's currently unavailable. Or a legal matter, you're waiting for a visa and it's not coming. Travel delays, writing, publishing, philosophical sort of questions may be coming up and affecting your job. And so with Mercury being retrograde here, you are encouraged to look at things differently, to ask how you can work through difficulty, right? Like maybe it's about building extra time, maybe it's reaching out to other people, maybe it's apologizing, maybe it's asking for an extension when it comes to projects. Maybe you feel like you're being micromanaged and you don't feel happy, and it's time for you to let go of something professionally. Maybe the way of dealing with frustrations involves not you being patient, but instead you taking action and exploring different paths. And so the Mars-Saturn conjunction in the 9th could be encouraging you to take responsibility for your knowledge, to take responsibility for your place, even your literal physical place where you live, and perhaps commit to something there. Be ready to sacrifice, but make sacrifices that will encourage better professional life. And, just also watch out for things like miscommunications with bosses, maybe delays of like supplies that you're waiting for, sort of like tech glitches at your job, and just be patient when it comes to those. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Next, we have the lovely Leo rising. If you are a Leo rising, Mercury retrograde is happening in your 9th house, and the ruler is Mars in the 8th house. So the retrograde in the 9th house is churning up, bringing up these questions that involve education, travel, writing, publishing, your beliefs, your philosophy in the world, and maybe inspiring you or calling you to go back over some of those things. The fact that the ruler is Mars in the 8th makes me wonder if there are some financial questions that you're addressing, like paying off your student loans, for example, or getting money to pay for an editor, or getting money to publish your work, for example. 9th house is very philosophical on many levels, so your values might be changing, your goals might be changing, your way of seeing yourself and your place in the world might be changing. Aries is the sign of action, right? So I wonder if here you're asking, how can you take more action? How can you be the hero of your own story? How can you tell your own story, right? And the ruler is Mars in the 8th, may potentially create some frustrations around resources, or it can encourage you to take responsibility for the resources you have. Start saving for that book that you want to publish. Talk to a financial advisor. Draft a contract you need with someone you're working with. So I think, like, first of all, definitely like rethinking your values, rethinking your goals, rethinking your character and your place in the world, but also potentially trying to figure out how you can arrange your resources, how you can connect with people that can be aligned with you when it comes to writing, when it comes to travel, and like maybe relocating, or when it comes to education, like going to school, studying something that you're passionate about. Legal matters may get delayed around this time too, but once again, the delay could be connected to the lack of resources, right? You have a lawyer, but you can't pay them right now. So once again, just sort of moving slowly, patiently, watch out for travel delays. Be careful if you're like going to the airport at this time, just allow extra time to figure things out. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Moving on to the lovely Virgo rising. If you are a Virgo rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 8th house, while the ruler is Mars in your 7th house. And Mars is together with Saturn in the 7th. There is a strong urge to get into long-term relationships, to commit, to join into a business partnership with someone, to move a relationship to the next level, to sign some kind of contract, and to join forces with somebody else. While Mercury retrograde in the 8th house will bring that layer of, what about money? What about agreements? What is fair, right? So Mercury retrograde in the 8th house could bring up a need to have some serious conversations, maybe with your romantic partner, about the future, about how you're gonna save for the future commitment, how you're gonna spend on things. You're maybe having some fights in your relationship around money, around resources. If you are, let's say you are entering some kind of new partnership, a new agreement, you may need to figure out the terms of that agreement, and maybe your relationship or this partnership slows down a little bit because of the need to take a close look at the future agreement. A lot of times the retrogrades in the 8th house bring up fights around fairness, and that could be like very different for different people, right? Some might fight about you're not listening to me. Somebody else might fight around about like, maybe you're not fighting, maybe you're just having like passionate debates. But there is definitely a danger of like, especially with Aries energy, to be a little bit like direct and blunt and sort of get in fights. Watch out for financial decisions at this time. The retrograde in the 8th house can, it's interesting, right? Because a lot of times like Mercury has entered your 8th house on March 9th and it's been moving direct, and maybe you've made some money, maybe you've gotten like a tax refund, some kind of payment, like money came from insurance or a return on investment, and then Mercury goes retrograde and this money gets pulled back. You need to spend it on something else. There's a bill you forgot, there is a major lawyer's fee or some kind of mortgage payment that you need to make. So be really mindful around money and around making big purchases, and there may be some financial matters that you really need to address. And you know, I'm thinking of it in terms of like new relationship, moving in together, partnership, contracts that you're signing, and agreements that you're entering into. 8th house sometimes also has to do with cleansing and releasing, eliminating the old, healing the old, so that the new partnership can be successful and abundant. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Next, we have the beautiful Libra risings. Mercury is retrograding in your 7th house. So Libras are the stars of the show of this eclipse season because it's activating your house of identity and your house of relationships. And so the retrograde and the second eclipse in Aries are very much about relationships. And the ruler here is Mars in the 6th house. So the relationships could be professional. The relationships could be you to your health, to your well-being, to your work. And of course, they can also suggest that there's a need to revisit something when it comes to your agreements in a partnership. 6th house represents paying bills, doing laundry, running errands. So with Mercury retrograde in the 7th house, you may have to adjust and figure out how to do it better in a relationship, how to have more fairness in a relationship, how to make sure that both of the voices are getting heard. 7th house could also be business agreements, with Mars being in the 6th house. If you have been taking some kind of proactive action, right, during Pisces season, if you have been handling business matters and making doctor's appointments or exercising, committing to yourself around the retrograde, and Mars conjoins Saturn also on April 10th. So some of that might slow down and progress might slow down. And so relationship conversations, business conversations that need to happen about that can also be represented by this 7th house Mercury retrograde. I think there's just, it's very much about your relationships. If you're single, it could be about your desires in relationships, getting clear on what you want, maybe writing it on a piece of paper. For some of you, exes could be returning into your life, knocking on your door, seeing if you're willing to let them in. Be careful, as always. Sometimes the retrograde actually is meant to help us close the chapter, so maybe you need to revisit it, but just know that a lot of times your desire for an ex or your longing for someone from the past is short-lived, and it's not necessarily a real feeling, but more projected feeling where you just crave some kind of exciting energy. I saw a meme on Instagram the other day, like, you think you want a boyfriend, but you actually just need to drink some tea and have an avocado. So beware of sort of false wishes and false ideals coming and clouding your judgment. And also, you can never go wrong by like taking good care of yourself, because if you're happy within, your relationships will blossom too. Let me know how this resonates. And if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Next, we have Scorpio risings. If you are a Scorpio rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 6th house, while the ruler is Mars in the 5th house. So Mars in the 5th, ruling this retrograde and ruling the eclipse. coming up is interesting because it's going to conjoin Saturn, right? And Saturn has been in your 5th house for a while. So maybe you've been working towards becoming pregnant. 5th house rules children. Maybe you've been working on some kind of creative baby, something sort of birthing something. There could have been labor pains and commitment. And so Mars conjoining Saturn could suggest some kind of like roadblock or frustration or lack of inspiration when it comes to the things you're working on. Relationship challenges, sort of like even, you know, like sex being blocked or sex sort of not happening because your partner is busy. And so the Mercury retrograde in the 6th house, I feel like encourages you to declutter and think of your inspiration as like a plant that needs watering, right? And needs careful attention. It needs, maybe it's like a very, what's the word? It's a plant that needs special sort of attention, like an orchid, right? You can't just, it's not like a succulent that you can forget to water, which I have one of those. But like, how can you arrange your life? How can you clear space? How can you take better care of your health? How can you eat better so that maybe the inspiration comes after you have solved all of those other problems? So Mercury retrograde in the 6th could be very much about addressing some health issues, old problems with coworkers, maybe redoing some of the work, revisiting some of the projects you've once worked on, rewatching some videos if you're taking a course on something, and being quite straightforward with Mercury in Aries and direct with other people as well about what you need, right? If it's a relationship kind of problem that you're facing, perhaps you need to schedule some time for a date and be like, every Friday night we're taking a date. I will not take no for an answer, and then start from there and work on things. And if you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, Anastasia.astrology.com, and let me know how this resonates. Next, we have Sagittarius rising. If you are a Sagittarius rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 5th house and the ruler is Mars in the 4th. So with Mercury retrograde in the 5th house, you are looking at pleasure, sex, children, romance. And you are trying to figure out how to have more of that, how to be more direct, how to be more clear, how to maybe find more pleasure in life, right? Because when Mercury is retrograding here, there's a chance that there hasn't been a lot of pleasure because maybe Mars in the 4th house conjoining Saturn on April 10th is suggesting that you've been so busy or you've been so sort of caught up in the issues of the home, responsibilities surrounding family, that you haven't had enough time to connect with your partner. So Mercury retrograde in the 5th house could encourage you to, you know, maybe you need to have better boundaries with family. Maybe you need to create some kind of space in your home for fun, like a sex room. I mean, 5th house and 4th house together, why not? But maybe it's about, you know, it's about kind of setting like boundaries with family so that you can have more time for your significant other. It could also suggest Mercury in the 5th house that you are going back to a relationship, revisiting a connection. So always, of course, be careful that you're not connecting with an ex and letting somebody back in just because you're feeling lonely. Looking back at old passions, almost like with the 5th and the 4th, I think like looking back at childhood and what once made you happy is quite likely here. More opportunities to be direct about what you want, more opportunities to express yourself, to speak up, to be more confident, but like very much the energy of like rediscovering pleasure, rediscovering play, allowing yourself to have fun and prioritizing fun. Is quite likely here. And if you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, Anastasia.astrology.com. If you are a Capricorn rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 4th house. The ruler is Mars in the 3rd house. So Mercury retrograde in the 4th could suggest that you are moving back somewhere or moving in general. Maybe you are redoing something in the home. There's been a renovation and now you need to revisit it. And of course, the suggestion here is that things slow down. Mars rules this retrograde. It's about to conjoin Saturn on the 10th of April. And so things might be really frustrating and things might be really sort of slow if you're waiting on people to give you answers. There's literally 2 planets that are considered malefics in astrology in your 3rd house, and like there's no communication. There is frustrating neighbors. There is some kind of, you know, bureaucracy, like community type. You need a permit for something and everything is just sort of slow and delayed. And so the retrograde in the 4th house is, of course, encouraging you to take a step back, to figure out what makes you feel secure, what makes you feel comfortable. How can you soothe yourself and be patient with yourself, be patient with other people. There may be just a need to take it slow and deal with some frustrations as you figure out what your next place of living will be, where you're moving to. There may be some family tensions, some kind of communication issues that you're addressing, a need for better boundaries, a need to rethink familial relationships, to maybe even talk about duties in the home and responsibilities and try to come up with better flow. You're very direct here. You're very like, yes, it's retrograde and there's a lot of uncertainty, but Mercury in Aries will not hesitate to speak up and say it how it is. So trying to find like a good balance between being patient but also being assertive is a big lesson here. And let me know how this resonates. Have you moved? Have you thought about moving? Are you renovating? What's happening in the family with you right now? If you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Next, we have Aqua rising. If you are an Aquarius rising, Mercury is about to retrograde in your 3rd house and it's ruled by Mars in the 2nd house. So Mars being in the 2nd house brings a lot of attention to your finances, to your values, to your need to be more assertive. But there may be some kind of restrictions. Mars is conjoining Saturn during the retrograde on April 10th, 5 days before, 5 days after. And you may be running into some kind of delay, some kind of roadblock, some kind of financial struggle. And so the retrograde, Mercury retrograding in the 3rd house, is suggesting a need to rethink whether you have the knowledge or you need to take some exams, retake some exams. You are rethinking your strategy, your approach. You're even rethinking your technology that you have, right? You're rethinking your car and your schedule and your commute, and all of that could be inspired, of course, by like the financial delays or financial restrictions, but also changing values and perhaps a need to be more self-reliant, a need to be more kind of contained and composed and commit to something. I feel like Mars and Saturn together in the 2nd house could be a suggestion that you're like committing to taking better care of yourself, or you're committing to starting a business and working hard and improving your resources, paying off some debts, right? And so Mercury retrograde in the 3rd house is all about how can you have a better flow? What do you need to sell? What do you need to donate? What do you need to clear? What kind of commitments do you need to release? Where do you need to be more honest, right? Where do you need to maybe spend less time hanging out with like neighbors? Or how can you restructure your life? How can you like rearrange the pieces of the puzzle so that everything is more streamlined and it can actually help you get to where you're trying to go? So 3rd house also represents exams, like I said, technology, commuting, your car. So have extra batteries, have a flashlight on you, just be ready for kind of more technical glitches potentially. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Last but not least, we have Pisces rising. If you are a Pisces rising, Mercury is retrograding in your 2nd house. Well, the ruler is Mars in the 1st house. So Mars being in your 1st house, it conjoins Saturn on April 10th. And there's a sense of like a need to get serious about your health. But you may also be dealing with some kind of frustration, some kind of roadblocks, some kind of delays to where you're trying to go and what you're trying to accomplish. So with Mercury retrograde in the 2nd house, you're definitely revisiting your values and you're asking what is even important here. Like, is it about better health? Is it about a relationship? Is it about a solid job? Like, what are the priorities here? So very much kind of questions of values may be coming up as you are dealing with tensions, frustrations, even maybe some kind of like health question that you're maybe addressing, needing to approach it more thoroughly and more sort of with patience is likely. Second house represents money. So quite literally, you know, if you're like running into a roadblock, you may need to spend some money to get out of the roadblock that you're facing. You're maybe prioritizing and thinking of like paying off debts and starting savings accounts and being better with resources. There may be some bills you need to pay. I wonder too, you know, with like Mars, Saturn conjoining in the first house, perhaps you are committing to like starting a business, or you're committing to becoming a writer, or you're committing to taking better care of yourself. And so Mercury retrograde in the second house is like, okay, you gotta, in order to do that, you need to have some money set aside. So let's talk to an advisor. Or in order to do that, in order to take better care of yourself, you need to spend some money. So let's figure out where to get these resources. So financial transformations, maybe be careful when it comes to making big purchases during the retrograde. It's good to do research, but it's not always nice to like just spend lavishly, because the retrograde period can suggest that the money that came to you during Mercury being direct between March 9th and April 1st will need to be spent. So you want to make sure that you have like money in the bank in case the retrograde needs you to reallocate it and assign it differently. But also just like kind of very big questions, I think, around financial stability, around being independent when it comes to resources and not relying on anyone. And even for some of you, maybe it's about being the authority figure when it comes to finances. Maybe you're thinking of becoming a financial advisor or becoming an investor or something like this. And so the question here is like, maybe you need to do research and figure out how you can grow your income. And this is all I have. If you want to know more, book a reading with me on my website, anastasia.astrology.com. Do not fear the retrograde. Go right into it, and just know that if things are not going your way right now, it's okay. There's different stages, different phases in life, and some of them are meant to be introspective, while the others are a lot more active. And Mercury retrograde is definitely way more retrospective, introspective. I hope you enjoyed this retrograde, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.